So what type of solutions is Visa going to offer, and how is Visa going to open up new segments so that people basically can pay the way they want to pay?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of layers to that question. I think the first is what we're trying to do is make sure we are in the middle of the flows no matter where they take place, whether it's government to consumer, whether it's B2B, whether it's P2P. We have a key role to play in that. So a few examples for that. One of our services called Visa Direct actually powers a lot of the P2P payments that happen. In fact, we power 7 of the services in the US. So Zelle, which some of you might know, to actually transfer between banks is powered by Visa Direct. Apple Pay Cash, we are actually behind it. So I think sometimes it may not be well known the role that Visa plays in those kinds of capabilities, but we've actually challenged ourselves to be in the middle of all of those flows wherever they take place. So that's one example. I think the second one is, again, we've looked at Visa Direct to be more of a push payment mechanism, so you can actually push from account to card, from card to card, or account to account. We've recently increased that service by acquiring Earthport, which some of you familiar on the ACH side would well know. That gives us connectivity to about 90% of the banked population around the world. What that means is we've now been able to extend our capabilities from just being able to move money between cards to actually moving between accounts, moving between card and account, any of those combinations. So when I think of open banking, or when we at Visa are looking at open banking, it's a massive opportunity to first
we pay. So what type of solutions is Visa going to offer, and how is Visa going to open up new segments so that people basically can pay the way they want to pay?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of layers to that question. I think the first is what we're trying to do is make sure we are in the middle of the flows no matter where they take place, whether it's government to consumer, whether it's B2B, whether it's P2P. We have a key role to play in that. So a few examples for that. One of our services called Visa Direct actually powers a lot of the P2P payments that happen. In fact, we power 7 of the services in the US. So Zelle, which some of you might know, to actually transfer between banks is powered by Visa Direct. Apple Pay Cash, we are actually behind it. So I think sometimes it may not be well known the role that Visa plays in those kinds of capabilities, but we've actually challenged ourselves to be in the middle of all of those flows wherever they take place. So that's one example. I think the second one is, again, we've looked at Visa Direct to be more of a push payment mechanism, so you can actually push from account to card, from card to card, or account to account. We've recently increased that service by acquiring Earthport, which some of you familiar on the ACH side would well know. That gives us connectivity to about 90% of the banked population around the world. What that means is we've now been able to extend our capabilities from just being able to move money between cards to actually moving between accounts, moving between card and account, any of those combinations. So when I think of open banking, or when we at Visa are looking at open banking, it's a massive opportunity to firstly extend our reach and go into new flows. I will say that I think there are some cornerstones in open banking. It's still important to think about authentication and how we solve for that. It's still important to have a system, if you're talking account to account, how will we manage disputes? How will we manage chargebacks? So it's not a trivial matter. So our approach is, be in the middle of those flows, find ways to add value on those flows, at the same time make sure that the card rails continue to be safe, secure, and seamless.
Yeah. You mentioned the acquisition of Earthport. Recently, Place was acquired by Visa. So how do you see this convergence of traditional card scheme payments and account-to-account bank payments develop?
Yeah. So we're excited about the commitment we've made around Plaid's acquisition. A couple of things. We've been in the business of connecting consumers and merchants for a long time. That's our bread and butter, and Visa Direct and Earthport and so forth do that. Plaid is interesting because it actually takes us between developers and consumers. It's a slightly different expansion of our capabilities. Again, what that helps us do is, Plaid is connected with consumer consent, is connected to many of the banks and connects to their open banking APIs. And so when fintechs are developing new services and so forth, Plaid is that connective tissue between the bank's APIs and the services that many fintechs would want to provide. So through this acquisition, it gives us an opportunity to participate in that flow. And again, that is a foundation on which we can build additional value-add services and so forth. Yeah,
you mentioned some small issues still need to be developed in open banking and payments, resolution management, for instance. And it's actually just about to happen. If I ask Michael, the UK is 2 years ahead of Europe when you talk about payment initiation services powered by open banking. What is your take on that? What are sort of the capabilities that still need to be developed to basically make this into a payment method that is widely adopted? And I'm Dutch, so I always refer to the ideal scheme, which is basically open.
Cross-border payments.
Yeah, I was also going to add, we do talk a lot about the infrastructure and how it's evolving in different ways to shave off seconds here and make payments faster. But just stepping back a bit, no one ever woke up in the morning saying, gee, I want to pay, gee, I want to move money, and it's going to be a great day. So I think if we bring some of the conversation also to, well, what is this adding for the consumer? Or what is it adding for the retailer? That's a big part of the equation, because sometimes moving money very fast is very important in certain segments. We found, for instance, in insurance, there's a real pain point. You don't want to get your claim by check, months and months after after an incident happens. You would like to get your claim quickly paid to you. So great use case for actually moving that kind of money faster. Likewise, you talked about e-commerce at the beginning, and again, stepping back to consumer value. Some of us very used to frictionless e-commerce transactions. Obviously, SCA is a landmark change in e-commerce, and it's a fine line between customer convenience and the additional security that that we're trying to get into the ecosystem. So how do you pre-select merchants that you transact with frequently so that you're not stepped up and your experience remains seamless? There's a real value around that. So products and propositions that address those kinds of pain points, I think, are going to be the real differentiator, irrespective of whatever the rail is, fundamentally underneath. I think the big thing is what kind of value are we as an ecosystem able to build and deliver for both consumers as well as merchants?
Yeah, you mentioned stronger customer authentication, one of the balance between user convenience and security. So if you look into that kind of technologies, so what are the implications for merchants and acquirers to get ready for this? I mean, there's some delays, obviously, but...
There are dates, yes. there are many dates, and I'm sure there have been many sessions here that have talked in, excruciating detail about what's happening and what it means. Again, so stepping back, I think the real aim is to try to get to the ecosystem to a point where we can balance those two things, user experience and security. One of the core technologies that certainly we, Visa, along with other players in the ecosystem are working on is the 3DS technology. So that's the protocol that actually helps merchants and our banking partners get compliant with the regulations. 3DS 2.2, which is the latest protocol, helps optimize for SCA exemptions. So one of the things that many in the audience might know is not every transaction needs to be stepped up or needs to be authenticated with two-factor authentication. The way you know that you're exempt from that, you need to have the inbuilt intelligence to say, this transaction low risk, this transaction low value. So the protocol actually helps optimize for those sorts of exemptions. It's also meant that we as an industry need to be more front foot in developing the services that consumers and merchants will need. So the example I talked to you earlier about, which is if you transact with a merchant frequently, you want to make sure that's recorded somewhere so that's not stepped up every time. So the product that we're developing around that is called Visa Trusted Listing, meaning you can select that is a merchant you transact with frequently, and then you can send that information to the issuer as well to say, hey, this is a known merchant, don't step me up. So it's that sort of innovation. Exactly, whitelisting. So that's the sort of innovation that I think SCA is making the industry come up with. And it's that fine line again that we're looking to develop.
Yeah. What other technologies is Visa investing in to enhance the shopper experience? Not only in e-commerce, but basically across channels.
Yeah. Great question. So one of the big challenges still out there in the retail space is how do you help the consumer go between online and offline, right? I want to be sitting in my house shopping online, but I want to go in store, pick up the item. I then want to return somewhere else at a mailbox. How do you actually make that whole loop happen seamlessly? One of the key things in that is authentication. How do I know it's you everywhere? And I think those are the sorts of innovations that we're working on, is having the right authentication technologies, tokenization, for instance. So no merchant is storing your card details on file, which we know, could be risky, but you've actually got this anonymized number instead, which is a token that helps store that information. So those are the technologies that help bring those kinds of experiences to life. Another example, just to, again, bring this idea of consumer experience and merchant experience to life, which I love, is around parking. Probably one of the most painful things we all do. You're driving around trying to find parking space. And we worked with a great partner in the UK, which has developed a frictionless app for parking. So there are road sensors, which can, you just drive over the sensor, your session starts, you're done, you just drive away. And in the background, you're billed for the time that you parked. Now, that is just the first level of use. On that, you can add things like the merchant that you're parking next to could send you a real-time offer to say, hey, come in, and I'm going to give you 2 hours of free parking. So, right off the bat, you get the opportunity to add these delightful consumer experiences on top of some of those core technology propositions.
Yeah, thank you. If you look into e-commerce payments and then the complexity below the invisible part, we are mentioning 500 plus different payment methods. There's pay in, there's pay out. So what sort of technology do you use?
I'll start. I think a couple of things that always stand out for me. I think one is it's never been a better time to be a consumer, right? I think for most of us, great time. Incredibly difficult time to be a merchant, a retailer. So just something for us, I bring back that idea of value is technology is great, and I know the topic for this session is technologies everywhere, but I do come back to we must question what the value is for the consumer, for the merchant, because if we're building a bunch of things where that value proposition is not actually clear, we're not actually solving a problem, removing a challenge, or enhancing the experience, we'll have a million of them and we'll be confusing a lot of people, but we won't really be doing anything better. So for me, the nugget is, can we be very clear as an ecosystem on what problems we're trying to solve? And lucky for us, there's actually a lot of problems that we can solve as an ecosystem, whether it's for consumers or for merchants, and we talked about many of those examples. So there's a lot of good areas for us to go after, but we must be anchored back to what problem are we trying to solve and what value are we creating.
Thanks.